Greetings, my Israelite brothers and sisters, heirs, joint heirs, adopted, grafted, natural, spiritual. Hope that everybody's doing fine. It's Friday night. I know I'm coming on rather late, but this is not Bible study night. I just thought I would come on and just check in because, as I told you, that I am out of town. But I'm coming on because there's a big hurricane coming this way. And with a big hurricane coming this way, people, I want to thank you for your emails, just checking in on us to see how we're doing. Everything's going fine. Everything's going great. This is a very unusual, unpredictable storm, as you may have been watching on all of that. Shut off Stephanie Johnson. Okay, let me see what's going on in live chat. All right. All right. Maybe I hope nobody's being rude because this is Bible study. We're not doing Bible study tonight. But anyway, let me just say, I'm sorry, it's my daughter trying to say shalom to everybody. Okay. How you doing, Kelly? I hope everybody's well. Let me just say something about this storm. This is a very large storm. It's unpredictable. Nobody knows where it's going to hit. Right now, I'm further up north. I'm in Central Florida, and that's where the storm is supposed to be coming. It keeps changing. That's just the way storms do. People who are not from here, that are probably here visiting or just new into the state, they're probably panicking very bad right now. So it's something that I've been here for quite some time, so I'm used to it. I'm used to the hype, the media. With the media, everything's always half empty with those individuals. They always hype you up because some of their major sponsors are Home Depot or the various grocery stores. So those are the news media's major sponsors. That's not to say that we're not supposed to take the storm serious, but I usually watch something like the National Hurricane Channel or the National Weather Channel. They don't have a skin in the game, and they kind of give you a better report. So that's why I always watch those local news. I don't care if you're in Jacksonville, Orlando, West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami. All of them, if you listen to all of them, the storm is hitting their city. So it is a wide storm. It is an unpredictable storm. So what you do is you just prepare. That's all you can do in a storm like this. Storms, it's funny because storms like this, like I said, if you've never been in one, you're panicking. I happen to be out of town. I'm not in the Fort Lauderdale, South Florida area. I am actually in Central Florida where this thing is supposed to hit. I'm going to be going back early because, of course, I don't want to get caught up here. So if the storm hits up here in this area, you don't want to be to a point where you got roads closed, highways closed, you can't get gas. So I'm just going south to where I live at. And we're going to probably do that sometimes in the next day or so, and before the storm hits, and just kind of, wait it out. And that's it. This storm, again, this is where I try to catch as many advisories as I can on it. And you just really pray. You buckle down and pray. I mean, this is where make sure you got homeowners insurance, and you just wait. That's all, you just wait. A lot of people go to the grocery store and they'll buy $400 or $500 worth of junk food, literally junk food. The worst time to go to the grocery store during a hurricane is when you're hungry, because you will literally buy things like 4 or 5 bags of potato chips. You'll start getting cookies and you just buy junk. You overkill on the water. People walk out, they feel like they need 15 cases of water. That's water that they're not going to drink in a year. So, like I said, after being through this several times, you just wait. You just go through and you just wait. You always get things like flashlights, batteries. You get canned goods, enough to last you for about 4 days, maybe 5. With technology today, you can recover in an area that is used to having hurricanes. You can recover and most cities will get up and going within 2 to 5 days after the storm is over. They'll be fully up and going. Certain sections of the town will be up and running right away. So people kind of converge in that area because they have restaurants that are open, grocery stores that are open, and so forth. And you kind of converge in that until things come back on. The last hurricane that we were in, the most inconvenient thing was electric being out for about 3 or 4 days. Yeah, 3 or 4 days the electric was off. And this is where you might have to get in your car to charge up your battery or something like that, or have a battery pack, something like that, or a generator, and kind of get yourself going. And that's all you can do. There's a lot going on around the world, nothing to put something biblical onto. But you got storms here. You got in Brazil. You got the Amazon that's on fire. You got volcanoes in Italy. And I think what it is that because we have 21st century connectivity, we see a lot that's going on that has always gone on. And of course, you'll have people on YouTube that always puts a biblical spin on everything. They'll say things like, oh, this is the 400-year anniversary of slavery, and this is where the slave ships, the storms follow the slave ships. And so this is the big one. This is the 400-year thank you slave ship storm. So Rodney says, what's going on in Central Florida? I came to Central Florida because there was a conference that my wife had to attend. So we came up with her, not knowing that the storm was going to be coming here. It was so unpredictable. It was so early. And even right now, when you looked at the earlier models 2 days ago, it was supposed to hit Puerto Rico, and it was supposed to be here right now, like right now, tonight. It was supposed to be here. And what ended up happening, the storm slowed down. Now they're talking about it's going further north. So nobody knows. It just knows. I just know that South Florida will probably be the safest place. But again, storms are unpredictable. They can hit landfall and then go south, right on the land. So they can go across the state. They like storms, like water, like hurricanes. They like water. So, and then you got a high pressure system. Then a lot of variables come into that. So that's why you have about 20 different models out there that's tracking the storm. You got as many models out there as you do have people running for the Democratic presidential race. I think it's about 20 or 30 people running. You got 20 to 30 models. So people just don't know. This is something that you cannot predict when. You cannot predict storms. You don't know where it's going to go. You just, wherever it's going to go at, that's where the Almighty is going to take it. That's it. It's the Most High. He's going to take it and guide it wherever He wants to guide it. And once you know that, you just sit back and you chill. That's it. So, yes, I hope that answers your question, Rodney. That's why uh, Linda Jones Vickers says, Shalom, Pastor Johnson, and happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath to you. Mark says, Shalom. Brother JD, how you doing? We still have what we're going to do in about a week or so. Shabbat Shalom, Miss Lion Pride, how are you? And Miss B, how you doing, Miss B? Um, so Rodney says, I lived in Florida for 5 years. Jacksonville missed every storm. Yet now it seems Florida's catching these events. What are you going to do to prepare? One of the things I do to prepare, I get 2 cases of water, flashlights, maybe candles, and that's it. You have some canned goods. Again, like in some areas in the South Florida area, they've taken the electric, either they've already strengthened the wires where they put in concrete poles instead of wooden poles, or they have taken the electric underground and pipes, these big tubes. So they've done that as well. So that way, if there's a fallen whatever, it doesn't blow a transformer or anything like that. That seems to be the answer. You can do that in an area where there's not flooding, or where you can really watertight those pipes where the wires run through. It's usually okay and safe when they do that. And you just pray. Like I said, you just buckle down and pray. I've got a brother who is really he's really going crazy over this storm. How you doing, Sister Biblical T? How you doing, Brother Jay Ponce? Yeah, so he's really panicking over this storm. And like I said, storms, let me just say this. Natural storms are like storms in your life. When you go through a storm, you look at where you are. Where are you spiritually? What is your relationship with the Most High? And you just believe that He's going to bring you through the storm. That's it. You just believe He's going to take you through the storm, no matter what the storm is, whether it's a financial storm, whether it's a relationship storm, whether it's a health storm, whether it's any other type of storm that people just go through in their everyday life. When you're anchored, you just ride the storm. And when the storm is over, you know that you're anchored. And that's how you prepare for a storm. It's the same way. It's very much the same way. At my age, I'm not an old man, but I'm not a young man either. I've been through some storms in my life, and I've always made it a practice to be anchored. Because at the end of the day, when you're anchored correctly in a storm, you always come through. You always come through very well. And you learn to trust in that. You learn, there was a storm that just, a story that comes to my mind that all of you are also familiar with, maybe not, but there was a storm, and they asked the Messiah, they said, "You down here sleeping. Why are you sleeping and this storm is going through like this? And why is it this thing not bothering you, but yet it's bothering us?" And he went out and he told them, you all are of little faith. Storm, peace be still. And sometimes that's it. You go through life, you go through storms, and you just say, peace be still. That's it. And you kind of like leave it. You leave it like that. And you don't worry. And then the Messiah, they said he was sleeping, his head was on a pillow. I mean, that, in that, when the apostle wrote that particular passage, He wanted you to know how comfortable the Messiah was. His head was on a pillow. He was resting. He was probably in a deep sleep. And that's it. You just don't worry. You have to know that he has his guardian angels all the way around you. You have to know that there are things in place to protect you. That as you know, you can be tried by the fire, but you're going to come out as pure gold. You have to know that. You got to believe that. You got to trust that. And you got to feel it. You got to walk in the spirit of expectancy. You have to walk with the mindset that I'm going to be okay. And that's how you prepare for a storm. If you start panicking, you're going to do like most people. They run to the store, they overbuy, they buy wood, and they buy, they think there's so much stuff that they will do when there's a storm. And one of the things that you do is just get a full tank of gas, and you might get an extra container, enough to get you 3 or 4 counties away that has not been impacted by the storm, and you head in that direction. And you just waiting. There's no school. People are not going to work. And so you go into an area where you can just survive. If you're able to, you put a few $100s in your pocket. But usually when you get someplace else, you can use an ATM machine. That's it. That's one of the beauties of being in a civilized world where you have not world, in a civilized country where you have technology and connectivity. And you know that we have a FEMA that's going to make place. But think about countries like Haiti that just does not have the resources that we have. Even Puerto Rico, which is under the United States, the connectivity was just so far away that you had to just wait to get some help. So that's, so we have resources here in the United States, and they've always been there whenever you need them. They've been there. Sister Tia said, FEMA. She says, remember, don't use them. Are people you've seen acting out of fear? I remember the folks who would clear out Winn-Dixie and Publix when they had mention of a storm. Yes, that happened about 3 days ago. It's been going on. It's been a frenzy throughout the entire state. And this is why you'll take some TV networks, Winn-Dixie is their major sponsor. And another one, there's another grocery store here in South Florida called Publix. Publix is a major sponsor for somebody else. Then you have Home Depot and Lowe's. Lowe's is another home lumber or tool place. So people that they all have their different TV stations, and those stations, those TV networks, whenever there's a storm, they'll go to that lumber store and they'll say, we're here at Home Depot in this location, and they'll have the manager, what do you suggest that people get? Well, come and get batteries. We just had a truckload of batteries come in, and that's it. And then they got a sign, all sales are final. So they want to make sure that you don't buy it and then try to bring it back. They'll tell you all sales are during hurricanes are final. So that means you stuck with it. You have to wait. I've got so many candles. I've got so many batteries. It's just during the hurricane season, you get enough stuff that's going to take you through for 2 or 3 days, and that's it. That's pretty much after that, things will be back on. Rodney says, I've seen CNN at the Home Depot. Sister Tia's talking about FEMA camps. Well, I will say this, that um, depending on people's situation and what type of predicament they're in, um, they, I don't know if FEMA, down here people go to a school. So if you live in a trailer park, there's a school that is a shelter. So the schools become a shelter. And why it's meaning that they have, FEMA will bring in beds, FEMA will bring in um, what they call um, personal, a personal package that has a toothbrush, toothpaste, mouthwash, couple band-aids, but it's just like a little bitty small thing of deodorant, and they'll give it to everybody, and pretty much at the shelter, um, once the restaurants come back up down in South Florida, what they normally do, a lot of the restaurants will start to take food there. They'll start to donate food and stuff like that. Um, to avoid FEMA, get out when told to. If you are a Hebrew dealing with FEMA, more than likely you would not make it back home. Um, I don't know if that's during the hurricane, Sister Tia, but when it comes to, I don't know to what extent of a FEMA camp you're talking about, if you're talking about a world disaster or natural disaster, but natural disaster, FEMA camps, everything becomes a FEMA camp. You're talking about Katrina. Well, Katrina was a unique situation, and I think that in that whole situation with Katrina, it was just people was just totally unprepared. It was just a storm that they was just did not expect for it to be at the magnitude that they had it, and it was rough for a lot of people. A lot of people moved from the New Orleans area to Alabama, moved over into Atlanta, even to South Florida, and they lost everything. I mean, just lost everything. Flood. I mean, that whole New Orleans area was like a bowl, and when those walls that were holding the water back, those reservoirs broke. It was just crazy, and that's all. But one of the things you do in South Florida, if you have a storm like this, you normally make contact with somebody in some place, and you just, even if you got to get out of the state, you got a 4 tank of gas, you ready to boom, head out. The last storm that was here that came to South Florida, and let me just say this, the last storm that came to South Florida, there were people who were trying to leave um, South Florida to make it to Orlando. It was during the time of the year where everybody panicked. And it was in Orlando, which is a 3-hour drive, ended up being a 10-hour drive. There were so many people on the road. And that's how bad it was. And there was no gas. And the reason why there was no gas because there was so many people on the road. And so the gas trucks could not even get to the locations to even bring the gas. So it was just total chaos. And that's what gets most people is the panic. Um, Again, being in Central Florida, leaving early than what I had planned on. I got a 4 tank of gas. I'm headed back down south to where I know where I can be at. And when I get there, I've got vehicles that are full of gas, and that's it. That's all you can do. Like I said, this is not the first storm. There's been, usually in the past 30 years, I've been through maybe 8 or 9 serious hurricanes, serious, where it was significant damage, communities just flattened. What I mean by flattened, it looks like somebody took an atomic bomb and there's no leaves on any of the trees. All the foliage is gone. It's just blown away. Okay. And that's what it looks like. It's just like you're driving and you don't see any leaves on trees anywhere. And then it gets hot because after the storm, the weather is clear again and it is humongously hot. It's the only thing best way I can describe it. And it's so hot that you just say, wow, and there's water, and there's ice, and people want water, people want ice. Ice trucks come in, and, people will sell a bag of ice for $10, price gouging, which is against the law. And usually you'll have somebody will get arrested or something like that because they'll go out and buy 50 bags of ice and then they'll take them to another location and they'll buy them for $3 and they're selling them for 10. Okay, so that's what people do. But again, you're better off getting a generator, hooking up to your refrigerator, put a little gas in it, crank that thing up, and you're good. And this is how people normally survive through hurricanes. Again, some people just know they're pros at it. This is just a lifestyle, and they know what to do. Then you got some people. I remember I had a good friend of mine, and one of his children were living here, and they were hysterical. What do we do? I mean, do we leave? Do we go? Do we stay? I mean, I don't know what to do. I'm in an apartment and everybody's asking the manager and what they're going to do. And then they're like, okay, there's nothing they can do. And it's like, we're afraid we're going to get blown away. Are these apartments strong enough? What we're going to do? And everybody, I mean, just total panic, So I had to calm them down and say, listen, calm down, calm down. When a storm comes through, if it starts to rip up a place, the only thing you can do is get into a tub, get into a bathroom, and wait. That's it. That's all you can do. And people put shutters on the house. That's the purpose of shutters is to keep windows from breaking. From debris. Okay? But let me tell you, if the hurricane came through there, even with shutters on your house, you're doomed. I've seen it. I've seen areas with shutters on it. Once that hurricane comes through there, the strongest part, it's not going to help you. Nothing's going to help you. The only thing that's going to help you is State Farm. Have you some good insurance, and that's it. That's it. And by the time that thing starts to say, hey, it's coming right here, it'll be here 2:00 in the morning, you got some advance notice. That's when you get in your car. You either go north or else you go south. That's it. And you kind of follow what the reports of the movement of the storm is. This one is a west-northwest storm. And here recently it's been a west-north-northwest. So what you do is you go south. That's it. You go south. If it's going north and west, you go south. Make sure you stay clear from it. And what you do is what some people do, you call a hotel in advance and you make reservations. And that's it. That's all you can do. Is get there and get you a room and say, okay, we're going to be chilling out here for a few days. This is why one of the things, Rodney, you asked, you should always, living in an area like this during hurricane season, it's good to have about $2,500 cash on hand, accessible all the time during the Florida hurricane season. And that should be enough to cover your hotel for a week, gas and food for a family. That's what $2,500 would do for a family of four. It will get you through for about a week. And pretty much then you can start making contact with people that stayed in the area or watch the news, and you'll see where they say, okay, this is open, that's open, and you can start coming right back to where you are. And that's another thing that you do. So you always have to be prepared like that. Next week, we're going to be picking up Bible study again. Like I said, I did this live. Did not intend to come on, but I wanted to come on, and I want to thank all of you all for just inquiring. Biblical Tea, thank you for the message that you sent inquiring, you and your family. Thank you all, the both of you all, for inquiring. And then we got some emails from a whole host of people just wanting to know how things are going here in Florida. And pretty much that's it. That's all you can do in Florida right now. Some people might say, wow, he's pretty calm. Is this thing really? Says, sorry, I am talking to Kevin as well as watching. So, okay, Brother Kevin, how you doing there, my brother? So yeah, that's pretty much, that's South Florida. I do want to say, again, I want to say next week, we're going to be picking up Bible study, even if I have to do this like this. Hopefully, internet and everything is still up. This storm's going to probably hit hard on Tuesday from the latest reports. I will check in. I will check in live as soon as I can, immediately after the storm, let you know how things are going. So that's something that I would do and keep you all posted as to what's going on. Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets. Rosh Hashanah is a term and a word that came in from the Khazar Jews. I wanted to bring that up. Wanted to leave you something. It's not New Year's Day. It will be September the 30th. That September the 30th is a Sabbath. That's a Monday. The feast day begins sundown on that Sunday and ends sundown Monday. Make sure you read the story about the walls of Jericho. Read it several times. That's important. Because yes, we are having service tomorrow. In fact, I want to be driving back to get there in time for the afternoon service at 1 o'clock. I don't know that we will be going live, but yes, we are having service tomorrow. Yes, Pastor, thank you. The Khazar made the year begin on the 7th month when it really begins on the 3rd. Well, I don't know. Let me just say this. It's not New Year's. I'll leave it that way. It's not New Year's. When you say the 3rd month, I think you're talking about the 3rd calendar month, which is equivalent to Abib in time. In time, it's Abib. But yeah, it's not New Year's, so we want to straighten that out this year, because a lot of people coming new into the feast days, and we want to let you know, because a lot of people want to be messianic, and you start to follow the messianic um, approach. And the messianic approach is that you'll find yourself adopting things that the Khazar Jews have brought in that is not biblical at all, not biblical. So that's not the New Year's. It's not Rosh Hashanah. It's the Feast of Trumpets. It's the first day of the seventh month, and that's what it is. And there's 12 months in a year. Okay, so that's important to know when we go into that. So read that story about walls of Jericho. And let me tell you what we're going to do while I want you to read that story. There's two things I'm going to leave with you tonight without using my scriptures, because my Bible, I think, is in the car, because it's packed, ready to go. But let me just leave this with you. When you read the walls of Jericho, you're going to find a parallel to that story in the book of Revelations with the angels sounding the trumpets. There's a similitude there. There's a direct parallel. Remember the stories that we read in the with the prophets. I was going to say the Old Testament, but from Genesis to Malachi, there are stories in there that are relevant for us to understand and the importance of them. Because remember, Israel is a microcosm of the world. That story about the walls of Jericho and the fact that they marched around for 7 days, all of that has a spiritual relevance and a spiritual significance that we're going to read when we get over to the book of Revelations, talking about the Feast of Trumpets and what the trumpets really mean. So you're going to find that when those trumpets are sounding in this story dealing with the walls of Jericho, I want to show that to you in the book of Revelations. It's a beautiful connection. And you're going to then understand when Israel went inside the walls came tumbling down. I'm going to show you what that is, what that is a comparison to. Who is that today? Who will that be today? Okay. Well, and I'll tell you, it's going to be Jerusalem. So we're going to show that to you in the lesson dealing with the Feast of Trumpets. The Bible is so I want to leave that with you. The second thing I want to leave with you is this. Last week, we did a story on David. We took the scripture, behold, no, I'm sorry. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. And what we did was we took that story because we read that. That's a famous quote. That's a scripture that you see on car bumpers. You see it in gift stores, Bible bookstores. You'll see a sign that says, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. What we did last week is we brought in what would prompt David, what was likely to have prompted David to bring that story. Now, although there is a spiritual significance of that, I went back in future. I went back into David's past before he was even born, and we went all the way back to Judah, who ended up getting his daughter-in-law Tamar pregnant. And when Tamar got pregnant, the first child was Pharez, Pharez was not the first child. Pharez was actually the second child. But when the babies were being born, they tied a ribbon around the first baby. I forgot the oldest baby's name. But Pharez was the second. They were twins. And when Pharez came out, we know that he was the second one. It wasn't the first because there was no ribbon tied around his hands or foot. I can't recall which one right now, but the fact is, Pharez was the second child. But when you count Judah, Pharez, all the way down, David was the 10th generation. And that's important because if you married someone like the Moabite or the Canaanites, which Tamar was, that seed cannot enter into the congregation of the Lord until the 10th generation. David, that's law. That's over in the book of Deuteronomy. That's law. David was the 10th generation who was able to enter. And so when you read the passage, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. David being the 10th generation, remember, when you count, look in the book of Ruth, look in the book of Luke, and you'll see, counting from Judah all the way down, from Pharez all the way down, you will see that David was the 10th generation. Now, here's the other point that I wanted to make. In the book of Genesis, it said that the scepter should not depart from Judah. Okay? When Abraham was blessing his sons, not Abraham, Jacob. When Jacob was blessing his sons, he called in Reuben first. And he said, Reuben, you're unstable as water, son. That's all I can tell you. But when he got to Judah, he says the scepter should not depart from Judah. He told Judah, your brethren will bow down before you. And he gave a, and I don't know if I could bring it up. Wish I had my Bible, but it said something to the effect that when it came to Judah, that, yes, I can't bring it up. Oh, wait a minute. I might be able to bring it up. I think I can. Yes. I don't know how I'm able to bring it up on another phone that's not really supposed to be working. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it real quick. And I'll tell you where it's found in 1 second. I think it's, well, it came up for a minute. I was going to go to Genesis, the book of Genesis. But it basically said that it gave a sign of Shiloh, or which is the Messiah, that he would come riding on a foal of an ass and its colt, colt. And in fact, that's what happened. And so, being that that's what took place, the internet in this room is just horrific. So I'm not going to even worry about that. But when you read in the Gospels, you'll read that, sure enough, on the 10th day of the first month, he told the disciples, go, you'll find a colt tied, bring it. And if anybody asks you, what are you doing taking it? Tell them that the master has need of it. And so that's exactly what they did. That was a sign. That was prophetic. Jacob gave a prophetic word telling you how you would be able to identify. And it says that it got into the vine and the grapes and, you know, it got right into Passover. So I prepared a lesson on that some time ago. But let me tell you, it's beautiful the way that that whole thing unfolded about David being the 10th generation. And it was confirmation that the scepter should not depart from Judah. And David came right from the lineage of Judah. That's where he came from. Judah was his great grandfather. And that's just a wonderful story. Next week, I'm going to be preparing a lesson that's going to be titled When God Switches Hands. When God Switches Hands. And I'm going to be bringing out how normally it's the firstborn, but I'm going to show you what the Almighty does when he wants to do things his way. He switches hands. In the scriptures, Jacob was blessing his children. He switched hands. When Joseph brought in his sons, he switched hands. So, and that's something to learn from that. It's common. It's just something with those individuals that it's somebody else. It's not the who you think it's going to be. And so that's an amazing. We're going to go into that, and we're going to talk about that next week. How things like that happen throughout a lot of scriptural texts as to what happened. So that's what we're going to do next week. Now, of course, I have to bring up a conversation that we had on Tuesday night. I brought up lost books. I think I may have offended some people because the way I was going in on the book of Jasher, and the concern was that I was maybe going after scriptures. Let me say this. I went after that book, that particular one that I read, because the preface said that it was conjectural and that the writer, there was no evidence that the writer was actually Jasher. In fact, it stated from the preface of the one that I read to you all and showed you online, it said that it was purported that the individuals that put that book together fabricated the fact that it belonged to Jasher. They were taking advantage of the fact that nobody has ever found that book. So there are about 3 or 4 versions out there, and they all say that this is the book written by Jasher, where in fact, the reality of it is no one has the book. That's one book that the Bible, the Holy Scriptures make mention of, but nobody has yet to date found the book. And it's because if you look at the preface of those books that do exist, that say that they're Jasher, if you read them, they'll tell you what they're saying. They're telling you that these books are more than likely not Jasher, are written by Jasher. There's no proof, there's no nothing. So when I went in based upon that pretext that these are not the original book. This is not the original book of Jasher. A lot of people have it. A lot of people, the book and the versions that people have been the versions that people have um, they have been placed in other places. So this is why you have to be careful. So if the book itself is telling you that it was written by someone else, then you have to look at that and say, wow, this book is saying that it was put together by scholastic people who was trying to write what they think that Jasher would say. That's what the preface says. I mean, it's telling you. It's not like that somebody found the book, like the Dead Sea Scrolls or something like that, and they say, here it is. This is the original book. It's not like we have the book and it says this is Jasher. It's individuals who are purporting to be somebody that they're not. And so that's what we have, and that's what I was attacking. So that's what I attacked last week. I attacked that because that's what it said. Let me see here. The very people who wrote the preface will say you are not an Israelite. Why are the Jewish people saying the same thing that you're now saying? This is a narrative that has been parroted down by the elite. I found the many European pastors saying, European pastors saying what? Well, I don't think what you're saying. Well, Sister Tia, let me say this about the book of Jasher. Before we defend the book, let me just say this. Is there anything in the book, if the book is telling you, let me just say this, if you open up a book and it's telling you that this book was not written by Jasher in so many words, if it says that, and if you read it, is there anything in that book that is different from the scriptures? The answer is no, it's not. There's nothing that's going to change what we know in the scriptures. The plan of salvation is still the feast days. We still have to eat clean. So being that there's nothing striking, there's not a new law in there, there's not a new revelation in the book, there's nothing in there that's going to actually change what we have in the book of Jasher. Why do I know? Because I finally read it. There's nothing in there that's going to say, wow, this is so much more strikingly better than the King James Version Bible. And it's not. What I found was some things that had alarmed me. And one is, in particular, that particular story alarmed me. And let me tell you why it alarmed me. Because the emphasis of the story, even by the apostles in the Gospels, the emphasis is on Abraham being faithful and committed. Whereas in the book of Jasher, it switches it to Isaac being faithful and committed based upon a argument that he and Ishmael had, who's the better son. And it switches the focus. The book of Jasher switches the focus from Abraham being the father of faith, because the story is not on Abraham's faith, it's on Isaac's faith in the book of Jasher. And that contradicts what we know to be faithful Abraham. In the book of Hebrews, it talks about how Abraham was counted as faithful, how he was willing to sacrifice his son. Because, as I love the way the apostle wrote it, because he knew that he would be resurrected. That if he did kill his son, because the Most High told him that through your seed and Sarah's seed, that both of you all are going to be the father and the mother of many nations. And because of that you all were going to be the mother and the father of many nations, Abraham had to be faithful to what that meant. So in the book of Genesis, the emphasis is placed on Abraham being faithful to carry out the act, whereas Jasher switches it. The emphasis is on the faith of Esau, because remember, in the book of Jasher, he had a confrontation with Esau, and he was also confronted by an old man who was the devil. And he said that, you know what? If I had to sacrifice my life, I would. And so the focus of the attention is placed on whether or not Esau would carry out being sacrificed by the father. And it's no longer on Abraham. That's a big issue that I have with that book, especially with it saying that it was not written by Jasher. That's what it says. Okay. The book of Jasher was originally part of the King James Version of the Bible of the 1611 edition. Which version? And that's the question that I'm asking, because there's 4, maybe possibly 5 versions of Jasher. Again, the one that I read the other night indicated that it was not written by Jasher, but it was written by scholars, and they wrote it from the perspective of being Jasher. So when they tell you this is what we did, you weigh it. You know, I'm not being gullible to just read the preface without reading the book. When I read the book, that was an alarm to me. That was really an alarm. So Abraham had to have faith. He had to carry out the act. And you can't carry out the act with sacrificing a 37-year-old man. A 37-year-old man is not going to allow you to sacrifice him. And so that's the issue. That's the issue. That's what happens if somebody says, well, I want to write the story from the perspective of Jasher. And that's what they said that they did. So you have to look at that, where as Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there's nobody coming up to say, hey, we wrote this book and we're writing it as if Moses wrote the book. You don't find that with Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It specifically says it was written by Moses. So with that being said, this is instruction that Isaac was given by Sarah. She told him he was going to be the burnt offering. Well, I don't know if that, you got Proverbs 1:8-9. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not thy law of thy mother, for they shall not be so the grace and the chains. Okay, I don't think that scripture in Proverbs has anything to do with Isaac and Sarah. I don't. I'll go back and look at it, but I don't think that particular scripture that you're saying where it says, my son, hear the instruction of thy father, that's talking about Sarah and Isaac and Jacob. Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac. Proverbs 1:8. Because there's other references that leads up to that. Pastor Johnson, please, you have to read this thing with a new set of eyes. Well, and that's one thing that I try to do. I try to read it. When I come across, first of all, let me say this. There's no hidden fact with me. I am very leery because last week I'm very leery of lost books and books that people want you to read. It was just a week that had nothing to do with the book of Jasher. It was really the book of Nicodemus. And in the book of Nicodemus that I read, the Messiah in that book went down into hell with someone by the name of Saint Deimachus, and they fought Satan, and they were able to raise people from the dead. So when you read in the New Testament, the so-called New Testament, in the book of the Gospels, the Messiah was crucified, there were some dead people seen among them. The book of Nicodemus says that came to happen because the Messiah went down with Saint Deimachus, and they had a war with Satan over those souls. Now, when I read the preface of Nicodemus, it was a book that was conjectural, used the same words as the book Jasher did. It's conjectural, not necessarily the actual book written by Nicodemus. That's why they call it the book of the Acts of Pilate or something like that. But people wanted to have Nicodemus to have a book. So that's what they said. But that story itself contradicts the scriptures. So this is why I'm so critical on this stuff. Because when I read the scriptures, the King James Version Bible, anything that contradicts that, I'm going to discredit. Anything. If it's not in that book, I'm going to discredit it. And the reason why is because all of the books in the King James Version Bible do not contradict each other. They don't. They do not contradict each other. None of the prophets are contradicting each other. They don't contradict each other. And so, is there a book of Jasher out there someplace? Yes. Do I believe it's the ones that we have? based upon the preface with them admitting that it's not Jasher, it's a book that they attributed, that they wrote, and they attributed his name to it because it's a book that nobody has. No. No, can't get me to do it. Can't get me to do it. And especially what I've read from it. You can't do that with the book of Nicodemus, and you cannot do that with me to the book of Jasher. Now, if you read it and you find some value in it, then so be it. If you don't think that it contradicts the scriptures, so be it. I think Nicodemus is a direct discredit to the scriptures and what we know. The scripture says that the dead know not, hear not, think not. That's it. So for a book to be out there and the authors of that book are letting you know in the preface that this book, and incidentally, the preface is written by the people who put the book together. They said in the preface that this book is conjectural and it should not be attested to Nicodemus. It's called the book of Nicodemus because if he was to have a book, perhaps this would be his story. It's not, it contradicts the scriptures. So I can't passively tread lightly upon it. I got to hit it hard. And then my question is going to be, is there anything in those books, unless you have not read the Bible, is there anything in those books that are of more value than the King James Version Bible? And if you don't know, just say, I don't know. I'm just interested in the book because it's not in the Bible, and it's Jasher, and it's Nicodemus, and it's the book of Bartholomew, and there's whatever. You know, if that's what you're saying, then say that. Other than that, read where the book came from. And if people tell you, I wrote the book, we're scholars, we wrote it, it was written in this century, and we put his name on it because we put his name on it. If they tell you that, then you have nothing else to go on but that, especially if you read it and you see contradictions. If it throws off the flow. And the Most High is so awesome that he has put a book together that has been interpreted. And if you know, like I know, the Almighty has always used the kings of the earth to do things that he needs to get done. He used Nicodemus. He used Cyrus to give a letter, to give a grant to Nehemiah to go back and build, and Ezra and those guys. He's always done that. He used the Babylonian king. He used the Mede and the Persians king. He always used these kings that were not of Israel to do his work. And he's never failed. He's the Most High God. He's not going to give us a book that has been canonized. And when I mean by canonized, it's a part of the package. And to say, and none of them contradict each other. All of them were written during different times, and they're there. He's not going to do that and then have a whole new set or another set that contradicts this. That's not the way the Almighty works, especially if the people are telling you that these books are not these people. Now, if somebody is digging in the earth and they say, hey, we just found a book and look at here. And it's written in Hebrew and it's got the word Jasher on it, and we've opened it up. It doesn't have a preface on it. because they didn't write prefaces then, and you start to see things in the book of Jasher that does not contradict what we already have, then somebody needs to call me. Other than that, there's 5 different versions or variations, up to 5, that are out there, and we don't know the authenticity of any of them, especially when they're telling you that they are writing them to purport what Jasher would have written. You can't write a book for me and say, well, this is what I would have said if I would have wrote the book, then put my name on it. You can't do that. I have to write the book. Moses wrote Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. He wrote the book. Nobody could write down what communication he had with the Most High except Moses himself. He had to write that down. That's why he wrote it. The apostles that wrote the testimonies, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they gave it to you from their perspective, and none of them contradict the others. They gave it from their perspective. So that's why I appreciate the material that we have, or the books, or the biblios that we have in what we have considered to be the King James Version Bible. But again, if you find those other books to be of value, read them, have at them, take them. But be careful if they contradict the scriptures. Because Nicodemus, the book of Nicodemus, clearly defies what all of the prophets are saying, what all of the apostles are saying. The dead know not, hear not, think not, see not. So you can't go down to the Messiah. There is no hell. There's no hell. There's going to be a lake of fire. There's no hell. There's going to be a lake of fire. So the scriptures is very clear. We know where that theology came from, that you die and you go to heaven, or you die and you go to hell. We know where that theology came from. Came from the Roman Catholic Church. And when you read the book of Nicodemus, it's got Roman Catholic written all over it. The theory in it, it's got Roman Catholic written all over it. So I'm not going to read a book, and I'm not going to say, wow, Pastor Johnson, be careful because you're talking about one of the scriptures. It's not one of the scriptures. I'm sorry. The preface tells you it's not one of the scriptures. It contradicts the scriptures. The Messiah did not come off the cross with somebody else that was dead named Saint Demarcus and go down there and wrestle and fight Satan over a 3-day period. I am sorry. That did not happen. Did not happen. Did not happen. It can happen. The only time the dead is going to resurrect and become spirits when the Messiah returns. Did people come back alive? Yes. Lazarus came back alive. He died again. The little boy whose mother went to Elijah and said, my son is dead, he brought him up. He brought him up. The little girl that was dead, she came back to life. But she was flesh and blood. Flesh and blood. And they died again. The only time that we're going to resurrect and become spirit is when the Messiah comes and sounds a trumpet at his second coming. That's it. You cannot read a book and say they lied. This is what bothers me. When you get a book of Nicodemus and then you read it and you don't read the preface, and the preface tells you that this book is not really the book of Nicodemus, and you read it, then you say, oh, the Bible is not a true and accurate book. They lied to us in the Bible. They put those books in there because this is the story they don't want us to know. I am sorry. I'm not going for it. You can go for it, but I'm not going for it. I'm not going for it. I am not going for it, especially on the book of Nicodemus. I'm not going to go for it. And the book of Jasher, I can almost say, you know what? All right, okay, I let that one go. Isaac got tempted or he got tested like Abraham did. But the focus is on Abraham. The problem what I got with Book of Jasher is it does not talk about Abraham's test. The test is on Isaac. That's the problem that I got. And that defies the scriptures because everywhere, even in the story itself in the book of Genesis and the prophets, they talk about Abraham being the father who was tested, not the son. The blessing came from the Father, not the Son. The faith came from the Father, Abraham, not through the Son, Isaac. So when there's a book that's putting the faith on the Son and not the act of the Father, that just raised some attention to me because nowhere else in all of the prophets and in all of the book of testimonies do they talk about the faith of Isaac. It was the faith of Abraham. So why does Jasher do that? I don't know. I don't know why it does that. Other than the people that wrote it said that we wrote it and it's not the book of Jasher. So what else are you to say? What else am I to say? So that's my issue with that particular book, and it's not as big as my problem is with the book of Nicodemus. That is that is really all. And let me just say this: I have no problem with the book of Maccabees one. I have no problem with that. Those I've read those. I read them all the way through. They're simply events that have nothing to do with the children of Israel as we know that the other scriptures talking about. They're talking about events that happened during a dark period after Malachi and before the Messiah. And so I have no problem with that. I got no problem with that at all. It's there. It happened. It's a book of history that of when Israel was in slavery and captivity, and it talks about things that can be substantiated. But again, it does not contradict the Bible. It does not contradict the scriptures. It does not contradict the prophets. I read the book of Maccabees. It does not contradict those other books. So that is a problem. I'm gonna look in the chat room real quick because I don't want to go that long without it. Do you know? Okay, Sister Tia says, do you know? Along with the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found a book that I'm sorry. They found a book that they said is so important. It is called the Book of the Sons of Light versus the Sons of Darkness. I haven't read that. It's the first I've ever heard of that book along with the Dead Sea Scrolls. I will certainly look that up. They said this book gives the military understanding, and it also explains that there will be a 40-year holy war between the Most High and earthly soldiers there's going to be between earthly soldiers as men as come on, let me see here. Sister Tia, that last part. Okay, the first book of Maccabees fulfills Daniel. Okay, thank you. The people who wrote a preface, I can smack them in their face because they're lying. Well, okay. They would say that Negroes being Israelites is conjectural and should not be attributed to the Bible. I haven't read anybody say that yet, though, Sister Tia. Nobody's saying that we're not the Hebrews, not in the book. I'm worried about Nicodemus. I'll do the research on that another day, but I know Jasher is where it's at. And that's the Septuagint, the Targum. All of these books are biblically based books of truth. John Williams says 40 years from when Christ was crucified and when Jerusalem was destroyed, J.D. Israel on everything. Daniel 12 was added in the first century. It is not in the DSS, I promise. I don't know what the DSS is. Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know. Do a little bit more research on that. Um, there are some that say that it was. Um, Look at that, whether Daniel was in the Dead Sea Scrolls or not. Um, I think one of the documentaries I saw, it was there. But let me just say this. The Messiah says in the book of Matthew that when we see the abomination of the desolation is spoken by the prophet Daniel. And one thing that we've been able to do with the book of Daniel that we have today is we've been able to authenticate it because we use the book of Daniel as a witness to do this. In Daniel's dream, Daniel said that the Medes and the Persians and was the ram, and the goat that came from nowhere, swift, and took out the ram was Greece. And then there was and it did happen in that order. And the fact that there was a little horn and four more horns came up out of this goat, we can go back and read history and find a point of relevance to Daniel's dream because Daniel was told who those countries were. And you can read in the encyclopedia, and one took over the other one in that specified order that Daniel had in his dream. So therefore, history has made the book, or the book based upon history has made itself credible. So if somebody says, well, it's not a part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, or we don't know where it came from, one thing that we do know is that what that book said that Daniel wrote, at least we know that it did happen in that order. So therefore, it gives it credibility. You know, it's like if you have an hypothesis, which is an educated guess, and all of a sudden your hypothesis comes to reality, and then a second one comes to reality, and a third one comes to reality. After a while, people say you are an expert in the field. So this is why the scripture says, let every fact be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. And Daniel was given a dream and the order of succession in which powers of the earth will come into place, from Babylon to the Medes and the Persians to the Greeks and to a fourth beast. And we know who the fourth beast was, or the fourth to rule, because it would be the one that defeated Greece, which was Rome. So that's how we know, or we can give that book credibility. Bottom line is this. Let me just say what the bottom line is. Be faithful over a few things. The Almighty will make you ruler over many. I, as a pastor and as a teacher, was forced to read the book of Nicodemus. last week because it was just disturbing when it was insinuated that what we have in the scriptures either we don't understand or it's not truthful, because all of a sudden this one book, not this one, but I'm just using this as a prop, of Nicodemus says something totally different. And it says that the Messiah with Saint Demarcus went down into hell and wrestled. So therefore, what we're reading in the Bible is not necessarily the truth. And that put my mindset in a whole, that's what spun all of this. That's what really spun it all. And then from there, I quickly went over to Jasher and started to read, because before I listened to it audibly, and I caught that story right off the bat. And I went back and read it. And one thing I do is I'll go and pray about something. And I did. Let me tell you, I did. I really did. I prayed. This past week. And I said to the Most High, I said, there's something I'm not seeing. And I said, Lord, I want you to show it to me. And what was shown to me was the fact that I brought up earlier, is that in the book of Jasher, the hero is Isaac and not Jacob. Abraham is the father of faith, not Isaac. And Jasher puts the twist on Isaac and not on Abraham. And that was a concern to me. That was my concern. It may not be big to you. It may not be relevant to you. It may not be an essential piece of information that will make you not read it. It was essential for me to say, let me stick with what I have, because what I have is enough information to, if followed faithfully, what we have will get us into the kingdom. And that's Genesis through Revelation. And if somebody says, well, I want to add the Apocrypha into that, go right ahead. Based upon what I've read, I didn't see anything in that is going to contradict what we know today as Genesis through Revelation, because that is what's going to get us into the kingdom. That's what's going to get us there. That's the law. That book is the book of the law. And so based upon that, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with this whole thing. I'm not going to beat it up anymore. I'm really not. That's my viewpoint. If you read it, that's fine. If you like it, fine. If you find something essential that will get you salvation, fine. But I think what we have, so it won't be books that I will make reference to as support of something. I will stick with what we have as the King James Version to make reference to. You won't see me saying, go read Nicodemus, the 5th chapter. I just won't do it. Especially that book. I just won't do it. It's just not there. It's just not there. So that's where I'm at. And I think that if we can just master keeping the feast days and the Sabbath, and reading the law. And when I mean by reading the law, especially Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. If we can read and master the book of the law that Moses wrote and read it and read it. I think it opens up your understanding to a far greater level. A couple weeks ago, and I made mention to this last week, a mother in our congregation, she says, we were talking about marriage, and she says, and I think it was in Matthew, the 19th chapter, and it says, if a man cannot put away a woman except it be for fornication. And I shared this a couple of weeks, but I'm just going to tell you again because I think it's relevant to what the conversation is tonight. So she raised her hand and she says, well, I'm a little confused. I've always been confused about something. And I said, yes, mother, go ahead. And she says, when it says that a man cannot put away a woman except for it to be fornication, if a married woman sleeps outside of the marriage, if she has an affair, that's adultery. It's not fornication. And her comment was fornication, and she gave a proper definition. That's between an act between two individuals that are not betrothed or married to one another. And I said, good point. And so she says, so I'm confused when it says that a man cannot put away a woman except it be for fornication. So I went back into the scriptures and I took them all the way back to how a married woman can commit, except it can be for fornication. And here's how. I'll leave this with you. We read that if a woman is betrothed to a man, but she's not married to him yet, and if somebody sleeps with her, you have just committed, you just took another man, your neighbor's wife. That's what it says. You took your neighbor's wife. Although they have not had a consummated ceremony, she's betrothed. And the moment you sleep with her, it's adultery, and that man and that woman should be put to death because it's an adultery. Now, what would make it not adultery is this. And it says, if a woman that is betrothed is out in the field, and if a man sleeps with her, then he alone is guilty because she screamed out, but nobody heard her. That's the assumption, that she screamed, but nobody heard her, but they got caught. Yeah, so therefore he should be put to death for taking his neighbor's wife. That's just for being betrothed. And again, betrothed is you're still taking your neighbor's wife. So how can a married woman commit adultery? If a woman that is betrothed to a man and she goes out and she purports herself, there's that word again, purport. If she purports herself conjecturally that she's a virgin and she's not, and the man marries her and he goes into her and determines that she's not a virgin, that means she committed adultery she committed fornication before they got married. Therefore, that's when a man can put away a woman except it be for fornication. Now you can put her away. And you're free to go. You don't owe, that's it, because she does not have the tokens of her virginity. And that happens when a man gives his daughter, and the best to his knowledge, his daughter is a virgin. But the man that marries her goes in and finds out she's not a virgin. She can't even bring the tokens from the bed at home for a mother and father to have, because maybe a year before she married this guy, she had an affair with somebody else in the next village. Okay? And so, therefore, she didn't tell mama, she didn't tell daddy, she didn't tell nobody. She kept that secret to herself. And so, the man, if he goes out into the village and he hates her because she's not what he thought she was, he if he does it and the mother and father are able to provide proof, then they will charge him 50 shekels. He's got to pay to the father for this, for giving his daughter a bad name. And the elders have ruled that she's got to be your wife. You got to take care of her all the days of your life, because you brought a bad name on her and it wasn't true. You lied about it. So that's how a married woman could be put away, except it be for fornication. Is because before you married her under the pretense that she was a virgin, and she wasn't. So that's how that happens. That's exactly how that happens. Okay. Do a study on how we got the Holy Scriptures, which is what it was called until changed. I love your teaching, Pastor Johnson. The commandments are to be kept. Thank you, Sister Faith and Hope. Sister Tia says, Luke explains a little more in detail with Matthew didn't write. That Matthew, yes, because they're two different writers. That's why. That's why Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when you put them all together, Sister Tia, they're telling the same story, but they're telling it from a different perspective. And the theme is still the same. That's what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John do. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, their theme and the underlying score is that the Messiah resurrected. None of them changed that. Jasher changes Genesis by putting the underlying theme. Faithful Abraham is not the faithful one, it's faithful Isaac. That's one point. So if Matthew and Mark and Luke, let's say Luke says, well, the emphasis should be placed on the thief on the cross and not on the Messiah, because the thief was the one who really shed his blood. I got a problem with that, because the underlying person is the Messiah shedding his blood. And all of them, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all talk about the same theme. Their theme does not change. The character that it's talking about, the center stage is the Messiah. And so they all are saying the same thing. They don't change. People say, well, do you have a problem with Matthew saying that, one saying that it was at the end of the Sabbath while it was yet dark, and the other one said on the first day of the week while it was yet dark? Which one is it? It's both. At the end of the Sabbath, it's another day. It's still dark. On early in the first day, before the sun rose, it's yet dark. So they're not contradicting each other. Whereas then you have another one that says, very early that morning at the rising of the sun. Okay, so you're telling me what time you got there, but when you read the last chapter of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, read verse 6. All of them say the same thing. He was not there. The angel said, He's risen. He's not here. So to say they contradict, they don't. One is providing added information. When you put it together, you got a whole story, but they don't contradict. They talk about a Messiah who was murdered, crucified, however you want to say it, and who was placed in the grave. And 3 days and 3 nights later, he rose. They're not saying it was one saying 4 days. No, they all say 3 days. And so that's what makes that different. Whereas the book of Jasher and Genesis, Jasher is trying to be like the book of Genesis, but you cannot change who the father of faith is. And it does. And that's what alarmed me to look deeper and to read the story again. And then I said, a father does not have to, it would have a struggle to wrestle down a 37-year-old man. Somebody had indicated, and I can't remember honestly who it was, said that, well, 37 years old, that's a young man. That's not like a 37-year-old man would be today. I beg to differ. I really beg to differ. A 37-year-old man is a 37-year-old strong man. And you're not, as a father, you're not going to wrestle him down, and you're not going to trick him in that you're going to kill him, but you're putting him there to sacrifice, and yet here's a ram in a bush. Okay, so that's my issue with that story. That's my issue with that book. Again, if you find something worthy in it, I say read it. If it finds something worthy, to me, it takes away from Abraham a lot. There has to be, when you're dealing with things like this, you have to weigh and balance. The fact that there's 5 different books that all claim to have been written by Jasher that popped up, but scholars are saying, these people are saying in their prefaces that this book was written by scholars to purport what Jasher would say if Jasher wrote it. So that's alarm number 1. That means Jasher didn't write the book. Number 2, you're putting emphasis on the faith of Isaac and not that's number 2. That contradicts things. And then when you keep looking further into it, the mother died because basically Satan tricked her. That's how she died, because Satan tricked her. Satan tricked Sarah into believing that her son was going to be sacrificed. And then he comes back and says, I lied. I lied to you. Your son's not going to be sacrificed. And out of joy, she drops dead. That just, you don't find something major like that in the scriptures. Because whereas in the scriptures, everything is consistent. When they talk about Israel, Another book is talking about Israel, another book, or let's use the Messiah in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All of them are sticking with the same storyline. If one adds something and another adds something and another adds something, they're sticking to the major points of the storyline. So something major like Sarah died because Satan lied to her, that has to be written in the book of Genesis. That's a major blow right there. And it's nowhere found. But it's in the book that people are saying Joshua really didn't write this. So along with stuff like that, it just throws up red flags to me. It may not throw up red flags to you guys. It throws up a red flag to me to say, let me just leave that one there alone, because there's nothing in the book that is alarming that is going to be relevant to salvation. It's just not. It's just nothing in the book. If you find something in the book that's relevant to salvation, let me know. I just haven't read it. That I have not read already in Genesis through Revelations. So when you got that much stuff going on in a book like that, then to me, I'm not gonna bother based upon the preface. Now, if the preface said, Joshua really didn't write this book, we wrote the book, like it's saying now. But then when I read the book, I find nothing, it contradicts nothing, then I would say, okay, well, I wonder why they said that, because this book is saying the same thing that Moses is talking about. Moses talked about a coming Messiah. Moses talked about that. I believe it's in Deuteronomy 16, 17, 18 chapter. He says, there's going to be one that comes out of me, that will come from among you all, like unto me. Hear ye him. There's going to be a prophet come right up out of you all. And that was the Messiah. So he predicted it. Moses predicted that the children of Israel were going to be scattered among the nations. So, and it actually happened. And the prophets talk about it. So what I'm trying to figure out is, if there's something in the book of Jasher that you have read that you feel is noteworthy, give me the book, chapter, and verse. I'll go back and look at it. And make sure it doesn't contradict the scriptures. But if you haven't read the scriptures, I recommend reading the scriptures and understanding the scriptures first, then going to read the book of Joshua and fully understanding the scriptures. Because other than that, it just, that's just my recommendation. That's just what I do for me. It may not, that scenario may not work for you all, but that's what works for me. I just, okay, let me see here. Let me see here. How did Lot's father pass in the King James Version Bible? I don't know. I have to go look at it. I don't know how his father died. Let me see. Daniel 8 chapter, it picks up about the book of the Maccabees in reference to the war between Antiochus and, Satan tricked Israel, being numbered also, the show. They would have had to say that in Genesis. It talks of her death and her burial even. Yes. So, yes, Brother John, Genesis talks about her death and her burial, and it says that she died at age 37. So does Jasher, says she died at age 37. I'm sorry, 127. 127. What it says is that in the book of Jasher was that Isaac was 37 years old when Abraham took him up to be sacrificed. Sarah gave birth to him at the age of 90, and that she died at the age that same day or period when the old man said, I lied to you, she dropped dead out of joy. So basically, him being 37, you add that to 90, she was 127 years old. Genesis says she was 127, so does Jasher. We know that because if she was 90 and gave birth to him and he's 37, that makes 127. How did Lot's fathers pass? Okay, I answered that. I agree with that 100%. The explanation is in Jasher. Mark says the explanation to her death is in Jasher. There's my elder. Look at Tobit. It says that he was from Tishbe, west of the Jordan. But wait, Tishbe is east of Jordan. Okay. I don't know what book you're talking about. Okay, Pastor. Yes, there it is. No. Some people go so deep that they lose their way. Shalom, everyone. There are two Israels, the north kingdom and the southern kingdom. The first one, okay. You see, the scribes were sweating about Tishbe because Elijah was from Tishbe. The test was Abraham, but Isaac and Abraham had faith. I love the book of Tobit. But all the men east of the Jordan became Bashan, where all the right eyes were bold. Okay. I think that's a subject that maybe I'm not, it's hard for me to follow. Okay, let me see. Here says, Proverbs is my new book that I love. Proverbs is a very good book. I am my own person. I follow the Most High only and read the Bible. I take no knowledge of it is profitable. And so they put in it Tobit to fix it. The rabbis hate Tobit because he was from Naphtali. Again, this is why, I personally love the scriptures. I love the King James Version. Now, I even have to explain that as I did a few weeks ago, because again, King James did not write the scripture. It's not his version or his idea of what he thought things were. He simply asked the council, and the council was different scribes and teachers and what have you, that knew Hebrew, and said, I need you all to interpret this book and from Hebrew to English. And King James was an individual that was paranoid. He was very paranoid, and he didn't trust everybody. So what he did was he put a council together to make sure that all of them, with the intent for them to, if there was a disagreement, that he would immediately know about it. If there was a plot, in his mind, a council could not plot to change the verbiage around in its translation. And that's what his mindset was. In fact, that's documented, that's recorded. You can actually read that in the archives, and that was his concern. And that's why he put so many people together on the council, because he was a paranoid schizophrenic. He didn't trust everybody. He was like King Herod. He didn't trust everybody. He was leery of everybody. So in this translation, um, he felt like that if he could take this, and this is a source that everybody's saying this is it. These Hebrew scripts that we have, scrolls are it. So he says, good. I need all of you guys, and it was a number of them. It was a whole council. You go translate that into English, and they did. And in doing so, that was his proof that they were not going to come up and change things because there was too many people there to conspire. If he had two or three in there, then maybe they can get with each other and convince each other to conspire to change it around. But he wanted it in its most authentic form, from Hebrew to English and from Greek to English. So that's what we do know. And I think the Most High was in charge of that. I think he planned it. It's his doings. He did it. Knowing that we are a scattered group, he gave that to us. And again, it's not to take away from any other books that people come across. It's just, I feel that no other book that we come across should contradict what we have. And that's where I'm at. And the book of Nicodemus really does that. Seriously, it really does. Especially. Now, I know you all might say, well, if you read the preface could be anybody. The preface is a preface. It's by the individuals who put the book together. In the Bible, you can read how it got to be where it's at. It tells you about the Council of Laodicea. It tells you everything that you need to know in that front section, those little fine small prints that talks about the council and the translation of the Bible. It takes a few hours to read that and look up words that they use, and you're going to get how it's put together. And I think it's important to read the introduction or the preface of the Bible as well, so you can understand why it was put together and by whom and for what. And I think that will be important as well. I was just looking for my charger in the event that I need to put it on this phone. It's been almost 2 hours. But let me just say this again. None of this is intended to hurt anybody's feelings. That's just not my goal. That's not my objective. It's not to hurt anybody's feelings. It's just to simply say the problems I have, that I won't use it. Why I won't use it as to when I teach, I will not use those books as to why. That's all. And I may have sarcastically went overboard when I brought out my points. I could have, but I just have those points with it. And I did that because of the preface. The individual said that this was not written by Jasher. So when you tell me that, I'm going to go in. I'm going to go in. Same thing with Nicodemus. I'm going to go in because the person that put that book together said it was not that. Debbie Willard says the queen over there is not the true family, some say. Yeah, Shiloh is King David, the earthly king. Jesus is the heavenly king. Deuteronomy 23, 7 and 8. Trying to figure out the big switch. 10, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be. That is the Messiah. Somebody just said the Shiloh is King David, the earthly king. Jesus is the heavenly king. Um, what Genesis is talking about is the Messiah. JD says Deuteronomy 30 and 14, but the word is very high unto thee, in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. Jeremiah 7 and 12, but go ye now unto my place, which was in Shiloh, where I set my name at first, and see what I did for it, for the wickedness of my people Israel. Look up the name Shiloh, and you can see the context. There's a place, and then there's the Hebrew name of what Shiloh is. Do we have access to the Hebrew manuscripts? It's a very good question, Rodney. I don't know. I've heard some on the subject, but I really don't know. I really don't know. And let me just say this. This is a problem that people are having when you start to question the book. People start to go into Egyptology because they say, well, the Bible's fake. It's a fake book. It's a metaphoric book. It's a fake book. Nothing happened in it is real. This is the root to that, I believe, based upon the conversations that I've had with people. Conversations about challenging the authenticity of the book make some people so frustrated that they say, well, maybe that book is not the right book. Maybe King James got us all fooled. And so people turn over to what they say, I'm just spiritual. I'm a spiritual person. When you hear that, when you hear somebody say, well, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person. That is a code to say, I believe in the inner, outer earth and the spirit realm of this inside man that makes contact with the galaxy. That's what they mean when they say, I'm a spiritual person. I don't read the book like that. I'm just spiritual. When they say that, that's another way or code that they use so you don't challenge them or look at them like they're crazy. So they just say, well, I'm spiritual. Because you don't know what they're talking about. But that's really what they're talking about. How do I know? Because I drill people. Everybody that I've drilled when they say that, and I've got, unfortunately, some family members that say that. I'm spiritual. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. I remember being at a Starbucks and I asked a lady one time, I said, when you say you're spiritual, what does that mean? Are you a believer? Are you a believer in the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Well, who are they? They're just people like you and I. So this is the way the conversation went. I said, what do you mean they were just people like you and I? I agree that they were humans and they're people, but they had a God. Well, I do too. We have a God that's a universal God. See, these are key words that just should make you alarmed. It's like, this is straight from Egyptology. This is straight from Babylon thinking. And when they don't want to, they have the right words to counteract your questions that you give. And if you say, do you believe in a Messiah? Do you believe that he's going to come and there's a raft of the Most High? Do you believe that he's coming and he's going to destroy this world as it is written in the scriptures? Well, I don't go by scriptures because scriptures were written, but I go along with the interaction of the universes. So right there, when I get them going down that road, I already know where they're coming from. Can't fool me. I already know which way they're coming. So this is why I am very supportive of the scriptures. And people, when they see these subjects of that are being provoked to say one book is not being truthful over another book, it makes them frustrated. And then they'll just simply say, I'm just a believer in me. And this is why I stick with one set of canonized books, and that's the scriptures, Genesis through Revelations. I stick with that because it's simple and there's no need to be complex, because what we have is it. Now, again, that's not to be taken out of context. I have read other books. I've read the Septuagint. I read the Geneva Bible. I read the Hebrew Bible written in English. I read the Cipher Bible. I have no problem with those Bibles because they do not contradict the book that I use as my main source. They don't. So I just want to make that plain. Okay? I just wanted to put that out there. Let me see. Is the Geneva Bible accurate? I found it to be accurate. I haven't found any inaccuracies in it. If anybody has, let me know. I have not found any inaccuracies in the book. Let me see here. You all have to know your realms. Heavenly Jesus can be king and high priest. On earth you have two separate anointed to be king and high priest. Hence, okay, you all engaged in a subject. Pastor Johnson, he didn't wrestle him down. Isaac allowed it. He said that he would be more than happy to be sacrificed. That's what Jasher says. That's Jasher's version. Isaac allowed him to lie down. Isaac allowed him to tie him up. Did you not read the whole chapter? Because his mother told him to all night in the bed to accept to be the burnt offering. No. The mother didn't tell Isaac to be accepted to be the burnt offering. And how do I know that? That's not what Jasher says, number one. Number two, the old man who came to Sarah as the devil told her that Abraham tricked you. He's going to sacrifice your son. And she became overwhelmingly worried and grieved. She went to go try to find them. And then he came to her, that same old man that was the devil, and said, I lied to you. He's not going to sacrifice him. What we find in the book of Joshua is that Abraham told Sarah, I'm getting ready to take Isaac on a trip. She says, what for? To show him how to do the works of the Lord. And that's what she thought the intent of the trip was. Okay? Now, what bothered me in that, because I'm coming to realize also what I read, is if Abraham told her the intent of what the trip was for, and she said, okay, well, that's fine. You're going to take him on a trip. The problem that I had was this. Father and son are getting ready to go out on a trip. Father and son. Why are you acting that way that we don't find in the King James Version Bible? As if Isaac is cannot be trusted with the daddy. The only way she had no problem with Abraham taking him up there. It was the next day when the old man came to Sarah, who was really the devil, and said he's going to sacrifice him. So that's what the book said. So she never told him to go up there and be a sacrifice because she didn't know that. Abraham gave her a whole total story as to why he was taking Isaac up there. So, which then again, it alarmed me as to why is she acting this way when he's only just taking him up there to show him how to do a sacrifice. And the fact that she kept him with her all night long. You just don't find that. You'll find that with a younger child, but not with the grown man. You just don't find that. No. No. So that's my issue. I mean, like I said, if somebody gets some sort of edifying out of that story that's what took place without it contradicting, that's fine. To me, I just had, because I did not read that in the scriptures in Genesis, that bothered me because what I read in Jasher is a total different story as to that event. And that's the issue. Okay, Abraham knew what he was planning, but he held out on the info. Well, that's true, John. John Williams, Sarah knew she gave her son counsel all night. The Sholo, I have heard Gentiles and those who have married Gentiles cannot enter into the congregation. What are your thoughts also on Hebrews who are married to Gentiles? I'll come back to that, Sister Yolanda. I'll come back to that with scriptures, by the way. Abraham, some say, was prophesying of Christ. He would provide an offering. Well, when you read the Apostle Paul, he gives a synopsis of the story of how Abraham, he gives a beautiful, I think it was either Peter or Paul, gives a beautiful synopsis of that story, which is why I said that Isaac does not fit the plot. You are talking as if I don't know that the people who took the mess with them and the things out, I can't believe you're having this conversation as if the events didn't take place. No, Sister Tia, that's not the case. I'm not taking as if the events didn't take place. I know the events took place. But again, if somebody is saying Jasher did not write this book, I wrote the book. And this is Jasher's, or what I think Jasher's account of the story would be. If that's what they say that Jasher's account would be, I think that's a little persuading from the story. That's all. I am not married, but I know who are married Gentile. Okay. Whether you think that or not, you should be very careful when speaking about Holy Scriptures that way. Well, again, it's not a Holy Scripture. If a Holy Scripture is, it was written by the prophets. Again, the book of Jasher is stated not to be written by Jasher. So what makes it holy? If it wasn't written by Jasher, and there is a book of Jasher, and that book, the writers of that book say this was not written by Jasher, it's not holy. It's like somebody they say, here's the book of Moses, but Moses didn't write this book, but this is the book of Moses. then that's not the book of Moses. It's not Holy Scriptures. I can't give it something that it's not. I just can't. And again, if somebody else does, that's fine. But if somebody tells me this is the book of Moses, but Moses didn't write the book, then I'm not going to count it as a book from a prophet. Because the person that presented the book at the very beginning, all 4 or 5, indicated that this book that says it was written by Jasher was not written by Jasher. This is what we think that Jasher would say if he had wrote the book, since we can't find the book. That's, I don't know how else to say it nicely. So it's not holy. If it's not written by Jasher, it's not holy. Jasher is somebody that is considered to be someone of note, a noteworthy prophet. And so when I find that book that and the authenticity of that book, then I would consider that book to be Holy Scriptures. But I'm not going to consider a book that somebody says, here's a book, and it says it was written by Jasher, but it wasn't written by Jasher. I'm not going to do it. I'm not saying somebody else can't do it. I'm not going to call it Holy Scriptures. And I don't have to be careful. I'm not blaspheming. I'm not being blasphemous against the Scriptures. If somebody says it's not written by Moses, but it says it's written by Moses, then it's not holy. That's not blasphemous. That's nothing to be careful about. That's just simply telling you, I'm acknowledging what the person said. It was not written by Jasher. I don't know how else plain to make it. The people said it's not written by Jasher. I don't know what else to say. It's like having a ring that's zirconia, and somebody says, here's a diamond ring, but it's zirconia. And somebody said, but that's a diamond ring. No, they told you it's zirconia. It's not a diamond. So I can't sell it as if it's a diamond because it looks like a diamond. So that's all I can say about the book. I mean, they told you it's not written by Jasher. So it's nothing holy about it. It might be something edifying in there, but it's nothing holy about the book. So, Pastor Johnson, are you saying that the book of Jasher has been stolen from the Scriptures, or the book of Jasher does not exist? The book of Jasher does exist. The book of Jasher does exist because the Scriptures and the prophets that we know, that we read, make mention of the book of Jasher. What I'm saying is that when you read the history of the book of Jasher that we're reading today, it says right at the beginning of the book that the book of Jasher has been lost. It has never been found. This book was written, and it's written as if Jasher wrote the book, that we believe this is what he would say. That's clearly not the book of Jasher. That's what they're telling you. This is not the book of Jasher. But since we can't find it, and it's a book that it's missing and don't nobody know where it's at. In fact, in one of the versions, it says that the guy took it in the early, I forgot what hundreds. He took it and tried to present it as if he found it, and he admitted that no, but this is what we believe. I don't know what else to say about that book. I just don't know the difference between the Ketuvim and the okay. First Samuel. Okay, so Sister Yolo, I'm gonna get to your question. Can a Gentile, if a Gentile marries a Hebrew? Okay, let me give you some scriptures. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says this. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says that if any of the Hebrews married if they went in and wiped out, they were told to go in and kill out certain tribes who were not Israel. They says, go in and kill them, wipe them all out. And when you go in, and what they did was they typically killed all the men. But it says that if you come across one of the ladies that you like her and you want to marry her, the law is that you are supposed to have her trim her nails, cut her hair, and let her mourn for a period of days. I think it's like 30 days. And then you can marry her. Now this is gonna be rough when I say this. The scriptures elude, or they make mention several times, if it comes and that you hate her. If a man marries a woman and then it comes that and for some cause he hates her. The question is, what does that mean? He hates her. Does he hate her because what? What makes you hate that particular person? Well, there is a context in the scriptures, or there's something written in the scriptures that gives us the context to what it means when it says, and it comes to pass that you hate her. You would hate her because you thought that she was a virgin and she wasn't. That's what it came down to. Now, if you go, I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to put something here that says when it came down to that. So if you went into a country and you were killing those people and taking over the country, taking over the land, but then you saw one of the ladies there as a Hebrew man and you wanted to marry her, you could. You're just supposed to take her in as if she's one of yours, one of your people, but she's got to shave her head and trim her nails and let her mourn for her mother and father. Because apparently they're not there and you're taking her away and she's yours. You got to give her a mourning period. Now, what does that mean? That means that the children of Israel did marry people that were not Israel. Let me say that again. That simply means that Israel did marry people who were not Israel. Case in point. Why did the Most High at the beginning say, don't marry into those other nations? Here's why. In the book of Judges, Israel was new. They just came out of the wilderness. At best, the oldest, was 41 years old and down. Why do you know that, Pastor Johnson? Was because he killed everybody that was 21 years of age and up. They died in the wilderness. So, I'm sorry, it would be 60 years old and down because they were in the wilderness for 40 years. So the oldest person beside Joshua and Caleb could have been no more than 60, 61 years of age. Okay? So those individuals going all the way down to where men started to marry, he left 5 nations to test Israel. And he told Israel, don't you all go give your sons to marry their daughters, and don't let your daughters marry their sons. And the reason why was because they could have influence on you. He knew Israel. Israel was too new of a nation. They were too new at this. And he did not want them to be influenced by another nation. Now, do you remember when Aaron and Miriam got upset with Moses because he married somebody outside and they went to go scold him? And remember what the Most High did to Aaron and Miriam for questioning the fact that Moses married somebody that was not of his own people? So does that mean that it cannot or cannot be done? I think the context of it is that you have to be the stronger party. You have to be the stronger party. Typically, Israel did not marry outside of its own nation, but we do have record that there were periods of times that they were permitted to. And in all of those cases, the underlying fact is that when they come under you, you are in control. You are the dominant. It's you whom they're going to follow. It's your faith, your God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's your standard. It's your lifestyle. It's your culture. Not you flip-flopping to theirs, but they got to flip-flop to yours. That's what we do know. How do we know that? Because Moses had that woman convert to him. Okay, we know that. The problem that Solomon had, he took on these wives that were from the other countries, and he took on their ways and not them his ways. The problem that we had with other individuals that the Most High was concerned with is when they took on the practices and the cultures of other people. But what we do know is Moses did it. And we know in the scriptures in the book of Deuteronomy, it says specifically, if you go in and into war, and if you take one of the women, and if you desire to marry her, then this is what she has to do. Okay? Now, I want to hit on this. Hating her. The reason why you would hate her, let's put that in context, is because you discovered that she was not a virgin. That's what you discovered. And I base that upon the context of in the law that it says, if there's a reason that you found hate in her, and then the next passage, it goes into the man that lies on the woman about her being not a virgin or not. That was a cause that you found a cause to hate her. So I wanted to bring that in, that you just can't hate somebody and you're married to them and now you hate them because they don't vacuum the floor like your mother did. They don't make macaroni and cheese like your mother did. And so now you hate her because she don't cook like mama. That's not a reason. That's not a reason. What was a reason that you would hate her is that you thought that you were marrying a virgin and she was not. Now, there were plenty of occasions where a man took on a wife and he knew that she was not a virgin. Knew it. Because it was made known to him. And if it was made known to you, then you either say yes or no. And if you said yes, it's because you found you had some love in her and it didn't bother you, the fact that she was not a virgin. And how do you know that? Because it says that if a woman has a husband and the husband puts her away with cause, right? And then she marries another, That means the other person that married her had to have known this is a woman that used to be married whose husband put her away with cause. But I'm going to marry her now. That means you got no problem with her. So you're willing to move on and take her as she is. And when you did that, and then the scripture says, now if that husband dies and the former husband who divorced her says, you know what, I shouldn't have put her away, I want to take her back, he can't because she married somebody else. But if she did not marry anybody else, and you put her away because there's something in her that you didn't like, being that you discovered that she was not a virgin, and you put her away, and months or a year later, you want to marry her again, you can, as long as she did not marry anybody else. Now, getting back into somebody outside of Israel, that's the best reference that I can give you, is that yes, it was done, and when it was done, it was based upon the individual becoming Israel. Because remember, Numbers, Exodus 12:45-49 talks about the same law that's for Israel is the same law for those that sojourn with Israel. That says that over in Numbers the 14th and the 15th chapter as well. Numbers the 14th and the 15th chapter. The same law that's for Israel is the same law for those strangers that sojourn with Israel. So, yes. Now, you're talking about specifically Gentiles. Again, it's, you have to go by what's written. You would have to go really by what's written and the examples that we have. And so the examples that we have, Gentiles simply means somebody that's not Israel. And they did do it. They did do it. I'm just scrolling down here. Okay. Sister Tia wrote down. Let me go scroll back up because I don't want to miss the context. So Israel can marry Gentiles. So Israel can marry Gentiles. Is it not true that Gentiles can't enter the congregation, and those who are married to Gentiles must sit in the back? Well, I would say this to you. The kingdom, in the kingdom, inside the kingdom, it's going to be for Israel, natural Israel, inside the kingdom. Those that are not spiritual beings, I'm talking about the ones that he does not kill, the ones that go through the wilderness and come through. They have to be tried and find. That's the second wilderness. So yes, this is why the law is that anybody that marries outside, that seed cannot enter into the congregation of the Lord until the 10th generation. So when Judah married, or not Judah, he didn't marry Tamar, he got his daughter-in-law pregnant with twins. And so it went from Judah, Pharez, all the way down. David was the 10th generation, and hence the scripture coming forth. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. It's probably what prompted that scripture, because David was the 10th generation from his grandfather Judah. So yes, to the answer to that question. Okay, so I'm having fun with you all tonight. Thank you for your knowledge and thank you for your answering my question. Well, I hope that answered your question. Let me go back up here because people wrote to that and I want to go back and read it. And it says, and Ezra the priest stood up and said unto them, ye have transgressed and have taken strange wives to increase the trespass of Israel. Now therefore make confession unto the Lord God of your fathers, and do his pleasure, and separate yourselves from the people of the land, and from the strange wives. Let now our rulers of all the congregation stand, and let all of them which have taken strange wives in our cities come at appointed times, and with them the elders of everybody, and until the fierce wrath may not be turned from us. Let me read that. And they made the end with all the men that had taken strange wives by the first day of the first month. And they gave their hands that they would put away their wives. And being guilty, they offered a ram of the bullock for the trespass. Read Proverbs 5. It is forbidden. We are not to do this. I don't know what Proverbs 5 says. I don't have my scriptures. But let me just say this. They did do it. Abraham did it. And the scriptures in Deuteronomy is a law on how to do it. It's not something that I would subscribe to, but it's the answer to your question. I can only give it from a biblical perspective. Now, when it says take strange wives, you cannot take a strange wife from another nation and take on their practice. You can't do that. You cannot do that. And Israel was forbidden to do it based upon of that context. Israel from Babylon, the temple priests, because they came back with barbarian wives. Well, let me just say this. Again, I'm going back to the book of Deuteronomy. I'm giving you law, okay? I'm giving you law. The law says that a bastard cannot enter into the congregation of the Lord until the 10th generation. A bastard was not what we consider to be a bastard today. A bastard was whenever you married a Canaanite, a Moabite, or something like that, that child is not a full Hebrew. And it would not be allowed into the congregation. That seed from an Hebrew man and a strange woman, that seed would not be allowed into the congregation until the 10th generation. When you have a law that says this is how you handle it, that means you can't do it. So, yes, it's a mixed breed. So, yes, you can do it, but there are other laws that come into play. So, for instance, a law that says that if you go into another nation and you take a slave to be your wife because you killed them off, if you take that woman to be your wife, you got to cut her hair, trim her nails, and let her mourn for 30 days. Then it says, and if it come to pass that some reason you hate her, in other words, you realize she wasn't a virgin, and now you don't want her. Guess what? You got to set her free, and you have to set her free without money. She's free to go because it says because you have humbled her. In other words, you slept with her. Okay? So it allowed you to go into her and allowed you to take her as your wife because maybe she didn't speak the language, maybe she didn't tell you, maybe you didn't ask, maybe you thought she was so pretty you didn't ask or communicate it, but I'm taking you to be my wife. Come on, take that one. I'm taking her. and you wanted to marry her, it says you could. She's got to shave her head, trim her nails, give her 30 days or whatever it was to mourn. And then if you go into her, and if there's some reason as to why you did not like her, or you hated her, it wasn't just because, you know what, I don't like her because she's inexperienced. No, that was not the hate that they were talking about. It's because you discovered she was not a virgin. And it says, if you put her away, you can for that cause, but you cannot, you have to let her go out free because you've humbled her. Now that's law. That's scripture. That's law. So therefore, the other law says that if you marry one of these people, that seed could not go in. So therefore, it didn't say do not do it. It simply said if you do it, here's the parameters. Now, when the children of Israel came out of the wilderness, it said don't do it because he knew that, and the context of that is that you all are too new, your parents are dead, your parents died in the wilderness, and I have not had an opportunity to deal with you all yet and reveal myself to you yet. So therefore, don't do it because they weren't strong enough. Now, how do you know that? Somebody might say, Pastor Johnson, was because when Joshua got them around before they entered into the land, they had to all be circumcised because they were not circumcised in the wilderness. That means they didn't know that they had to be circumcised. They was just going through. You have to teach people this stuff. So right before Passover came, he says circumcise them because they had not been circumcised while they were in the way. In the way what? In the wilderness. They were not circumcised. Why were they not circumcised? Because they did not know things the way they should. Okay? So that's why they were not allowed to marry into the other nations. All right, you guys, let me say here, 400 young virgins had by, wow, okay. Back in the day, race mixing was very rare. It was very rare. It was very, very rare. JD, what's the topic next Sabbath day? I don't know. Just be ready, man. Be ready. You'll be ready. I know you will be. Sister Tia says, exactly. He said for us not to do it, and we was not supposed to because he knew what would happen. So therefore, even though certain people did it, it was not supposed to be done. Meanwhile, the Gentiles who are asking, like, yeah, been keeping it, but I'm pure. So Sister Yolo, if you're talking about today, can we mix? Again, I would simply say to you, simply say to you that you can't marrying somebody because they're of the same nationality that you are and they don't believe what you believe I would prefer to see somebody marry somebody that is not of their nationality but believes what they believe. But pray and the Almighty will find you somebody that is of you that believes what you believe. Now, that's what I would tell people. I can't say, I'm not comfortable in saying that you cannot do it. I think if two people on this side of the flood, if if you if you should look for somebody that believes the scriptures like you believe the scriptures. And if they believe that what you believe according to the scriptures, um, I think you would be okay. However, I put out the laws to what it says as to what happens. Um, and yes, that is true, Sister T, exactly. And if you keep mixing the blood, then the children of Israel will forget what they're supposed to do. Well, we did that and we wasn't even mixed. We just was rebellious. This is why the word of God has been watered down for so long, because the children of Israel have been mixing with the other nations. Um, Sister Sandy says, absolutely, Sister Tia. Meanwhile, the Gentiles who are Ashkenazi have been keeping their bloodline pure, and their children have carried out the deeds of their father. Exactly. And he said for us to do it, and we're not supposed to do it because we would happen certain people. Pastor Jones said, okay, I read that. Okay, so um, y'all asked some tough questions, but they're really not tough. That's why I said I'm going to always go back to the law and read you the law, because I can't tell you it didn't happen, because it did happen. And there's a law that gave a rule of engagement. There's also strong instructions when the children of Israel were young not to do it. So I would tell people today, especially people coming into the knowledge of the truth, marry people who believe what you believe. If you know you have the truth, then you need to stick with people who know the truth. Because if you try to go out and marry somebody that's keeping Christmas and Easter, ain't gonna make it. Ain't gonna make it. It's gonna be disastrous. Okay, I know people that's been married 2, 3 times because they thought that they could change somebody. No, they almost got changed to doing mess. So I would say don't do it based upon that. If you're a strong-minded individual and you tell people on the bed, listen, we're going to get married, this is what you're going to be doing. If you're not going to be doing this, boom, let me know now, because you're not eating pork anymore. You're not going to be celebrating Easter bunny rabbit or Christmas anymore. This is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be keeping feast days of the Most High. If you can't do that, then you need to tell everybody that. Whether they think they're Hebrew, know that they're Hebrew, whatever the case, if they're not doing that, cut it, cut them quick, because it's too much aggravation. Too much aggravation these days. It really is. Man, we had a good time tonight. I did not plan on being here. I don't know what time it is, but this was good. You can't rush stuff like this. I'm just coming to the point. You can't rush stuff like this. And let me see, how are we doing here? We're doing pretty good. I mean, we're doing pretty good. Okay. So, Sholo. With that being said, I am surprised that there are even true blood Hebrews. Well, let me say this. What's the true blood Hebrew? The apostle says, he is not a Jew which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the flesh, but circumcision is that of the heart, meaning the heart of the mind. There are Hebrews today who will argue with you up and down that they're not Hebrews, and will eat some fat back pigs, whatever they call it. What you gonna do with a person like that? You gonna marry them and say, well, they're Hebrew? I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't. I would not touch that. I would not touch that. I would just wait until I find somebody that believes what I believe. I just, I wouldn't do it. And what I did when I married my wife, I let her know right off the bat, this is what I believe. She's a Hebrew. She's a Hebrew. And I said, this is what I believe. This is what I teach. We're not eating no pork. Ain't gonna be no Christmas. Ain't gonna be no Easter. Ain't gonna happen. And that's what I did. And that's what I encourage people to do, because I think if you do that, then you're in an easier place when you're up front and you let people do that. Then you're in a position that you can have more control, and you're more transparent, and you're there on the table. But when you marry people who don't believe what you believe, they're strange. That's what makes them strange. And when you do that, you're gonna have some problems. You're gonna have some problems. So that's the best I can tell you with that. Find you somebody that's Hebrew that you can train and teach, and give it to them straight up front, right off the bat. Train them and teach them before you marry them. That way you'll know right off the bat. You'll know what intent that they're trying to do. So that's the way I can put it. I wonder okay, my chat went out, so I don't know what to tell you all on that. Okay, because I probably went off a little bit. For the lips of a strange woman drop as in honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil, but the end is bitter, and the wormwood sharper as a two-edged sword. You must be reading Proverbs, the scriptures that you put up. Read, okay. Yeah, well, again, that's what makes a woman strange, is a man could be strange too. If they're not teaching and believing what you teach, then they are definitely a person that's not of your nation, that's teaching what you're teaching, and you need to stay far away from that as possibly can, as possible. Just run. Just go the opposite direction. That's the best way I can tell you. Go the opposite direction. Okay, so next week we're going to be here. We're going to be live again. Hopefully, I will get back to Bethel on time. I know I'm not going to get there in the morning, but I'm scheduled not to be there tomorrow at all, but I think I'm going to try to get there by 1 o'clock. And let me see what else. Pray for us in the storm, that the storm protects us. It's going to hit, no doubt. This is going to be a storm that hits. But the scripture says, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High. So we dwell in his bosom, and I know that he's going to protect us. And I know that he's going to put his guardian angels around us. So though we're going through this storm, I'm not worried. I'm not worried, not one bit, not one bit. I'm not afraid, I'm not worried, and don't intend to panic. I'm just going to come through. So, I think what I'll do is, especially if I have some reception, I may get some footage and kind of show you all what a hurricane looks like, going through it and stuff like that. And so you can kind of get an idea. It's very unique. You don't sleep because it's the trees. Just a palm tree just goes like this. It's like a bush. It just and that tree is hard to bend. I mean, when I tell you hard to bend, you look at that tree, it's like it's no way it can bend. But when that storm comes, that thing is like this. Never seen nothing like it. And then very, very seldom does a palm tree come out of the ground during a hurricane. The leaves blow off those palms, but very seldom does that thing pop up out of the ground. I just, and like I said, I've been here for 30 years. I've never seen it. I've seen other trees, like the limbs bend and they just snap, like an oak tree or any other tree, olive tree. They'll bend and they'll just snap right in half. But that straight palm tree, it just goes shoo, just like this. And it's amazing to see. And the roots is not like those other trees. The roots is like imagine a round basketball with a stick coming out of it. That's the way a palm tree does. But other trees, they root like, like 15, 30 feet away from the tree, and those things still snap. I mean, like, it's just the way it is. They're not, some of those trees are not meant to be in a tropical area like this, but they are. So I'll keep you updated on the storm. So all of that saying, I want to say peace and shalom to all of you all. Thank you, Sister Tia. Thank you, Lady Sandy. Sister Tia said I gave her gray hairs tonight. I've been through Harvey. I'm good, Bishop. Okay. Um, I really, I enjoy this. I really do. Okay, so again, I don't know what time it is. I just know I've been here for 3 hours, and I did not intended to just come in and just say a few things, but I'm sitting in a hotel room, and I said, I want to do this. I want to do this tonight. So anyway, peace and shalom. We'll talk soon. I am definitely, y'all saw me yawning, so I'm definitely going to bed, but we'll talk soon. Peace and shalom. I'll be doing a live cam and I'm going to give you just a complete update from my perspective on the storm. I'm going to let you see some of the wind and all of that. It's going to be great. So peace and shalom. We'll talk soon.